for my crazy Okay, and Forrest, it does look like we're live streaming.
Yep, I figured out what was going on and I wrote it down so that I can share that with Dara.
Great. All right. So people are still coming in. We'll give them a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. And just be aware that my camera is pretty bad. I just got kicked off a minute. So if you see me turning into a modernist painting, that's what's going on. It's not a filter, sadly. And welcome, audience. You are at the Willow Springs release party of issue 91. And we're all awkwardly waiting for you in the Zoom. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. And audience, yeah. So we are at the release party of Willow Springs issue 91. This is the new issue. I'm delighted to introduce it tonight. I'm Polly Buckingham and I'm the editor, and I will tell you a little bit about the issue. We have 11 readers tonight. And I wanted to take a moment to recognize the literary contributions. Oops, can you guys? Okay, so panelists, you want to make sure all of your mics are off. That's weird. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to take a moment to recognize the literary contributions of Kevin McElvoy, who died this last fall. Kevin has been in several issues of Willow Springs. He is the author of 5 novels, a short story collection, and a collection of prose poems. And he had a draft of a poetry manuscript completed at the time of his death. His work continues to be published in journals as we speak. His work is strikingly original and strange in all the right ways. It's experimental, intellectually rich, and always emotionally resonant. There is a calling out in Kevin's work, a fury, and also an unwavering insistence for a justice of the heart. Kevin was the fiction editor for Puerta del Sol for 27 years. He also taught in the Warren Wilson MFA program and at New Mexico State University for long periods of time, and in addition to other editorial and teaching positions. Kevin was kind, intuitive, and really smart. If you want to see how smart, just read the Willow Springs interview with him. He was intuitive and incredibly generous. He offered, for instance, to give the interviewers from the staff at Willow Springs a read of any manuscript they wanted to send him. This issue opens with a short note from Willow Springs staff and past editors in memoriam. And you can also read his work in past issues and the interview in issue 88. Tonight, I also want to introduce our first annual Surrealist Prize. We will be accepting submissions of up to 3 poems until September 15th. It's $15 to submit. And there's a $1,000 prize for a single poem. Our final judge will be Christopher Howell, and that information is slowly coming up on our website. So feel free to look into it if that's that's what you write. And finally, I in particular want to acknowledge and thank the staff of Willow Springs for their hard work on this issue. The managing editor, Forrest Brown, assistant managing editor, Dora Anderson, web editor, Blair Jennings, fiction editor, Jennifer Krasner, nonfiction editor, Allison Waite, poetry editor, Oran Boardwell, and our social media coordinator, Morgan Henderson, who's been really working hard behind the scenes on this event. And then all of our many readers for the journal, about 20 or 30 other readers for the journal. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Dora, who's going to introduce our readers.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say again, thank you again for being here. And I have the pleasure of introducing our first reader, Emma Aylor. Emma Aylor is the author of Close Red Water from Barrow Street Press, winner of the Barrow Street Book Prize. Her poems have appeared in New England Review, AGNI, Colorado Review, Poetry Daily, and the Yale Review Online, in addition to elsewhere. She lives in Lubbock, Texas. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you so much. So I'll be sharing my screen for a second here just to show everyone the set of images behind the first poem I'll read, which is the one in Willow Springs. So this is essentially a 17th century paper doll, I guess you could say. It's a portrait miniature that has these little overlays where you can dress the figure in different costumes. So that's what I'm working with in this poem. So that's what I'll be talking about. Okay, so this is self-portrait as miniature with mica overlays. On my object hood, there are a few details. I come cased in a book of leather scrolled and honeycombed with golden tooling. I come so that on one side there's nothing, a blue basin for storage, and on the left I'm naked, blushing, slope-shouldered, and with a bit of paint scratched out behind me, the copper ground shone through. You're intended to dress me as priest, as costumed, as man, woman, Bacchus, bearded, traveling in a cloak, as artist, jester, or king, as widow dressed in black. Transparent discs of oil-painted mica on the common table. A window glass is in each where my face can go, these little dressings without soles that I wear to be different. The overlays, too, must be worn to be in a kind of symbiosis. They weren't painted with bodies, so I give mine. It's how I got the name of Master Image. Only the lioness, just a skin, has a sort of face, and when I wear her, my own sits easy in the open mouth. No teeth, and I'm there instead. She's cut off below the whiskers. Maybe I, like Heracles, killed her and used her claws to shear the golden pelt. I'm aware you want to make me various, that person's ken for changing ever into other people. And you see in my face that I savor your seeing. My lioness is tied in a knot at my chest. my cat eyes dead and painted to look alive, but so am I. Wherein the illusion? And even so, you perceive me to be human, or if not human, made nearby. You must know I've been touched by the oil and plane of many hands. Keep the mineral sheaf up next to me when you close the hide, so I can be pressed against each life I'm not, but could be shown to be. And I was going to read one other poem, and this one is called Landscape with Guide. In the picture, there are no further pictures. It's aware instead of the closure to its surface that sunlight drags squares on its wall from the window panes, that someone sees it, could touch it, but doesn't. If there's a river, you imagine lifting it up from the valley like a long piece of hair. If a mountain, lathing the outline to carry curls of indigo in your arms away, off to be known. This takes place in the desert, the field, the landscape unseen. Where there is water, it makes no sound. Where there is no picture, where to put my hands? I tell you, you trust it. The scene being false, having been made already, having brushed itself out. When I tell you the place made has only a small need for me, you understand. As a smoke of gnats in the foreground supplies the color of grass to the grass. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. Our next reader will be Heikki Huotari. Heikki attended a one-room school and spent summers on a forest fire lookout tower. Since retiring from academia and mathematics, he has published poems in numerous journals and is the author of 5 poetry collections. His manuscript To Justify the Butterfly won second prize and publication in the 2022 James Tate Chapbook Competition. Welcome.
Thank you, Dora and Polly and everyone else at Willow Springs. I so appreciate your support of my work. On occasion, I write another just so story. One such as is titled How the Leopard Got Its Stripes. I'm going to read 2 tonight about the mayfly. Recall that mayflies live at least 2 days. In the first poem, the mayflies try their hand at prophecy in vain. How the mayfly got its megaphone 1. Cubic corners are belied by spiders and by social graces. Ad absurda, culminating in a contradiction, 2 or more attorneys general are subsisting on the manna at an intersection of supply chains. As the Santa Claus to end all Santa Clauses, I rise to a point of order. 2020, I cite Robert's rules. While second-guessing judgment calls, a Monday morning quarterback remotely stakes a claim. My siren on, I'm emulating an ambiguously gendered athlete. Flammable, it's better to be sanctioned by a church than in that church to burn. As God says, tickle, tickle, I say, visit every permutation. You could have been otherwise. Your miracle is measured by how many failed. You may be granted 7 million wishes. Did I say Jerusalem will turn? The second mayfly just so story is the one in Willow Springs 91. The mayfly was a would-be good Samaritan and the mayfly was training for a marathon at 4 a.m., heard footsteps and looked around, but no other creature was stirring. How the mayfly got its megaphone too. A good Samaritan thought it was a defibrillator, but it was a glitter bomb, ha ha. A cosmonaut not seeing God was spiraling down to Damascus. Jacob, with a ruler and a compass, struggled all night to trisect an angle. Bless you, said the angel, but the problem was not solved. Now, on some other planet, fluent in 5 languages and dancing with what seems to be a hat rack, there, but for the crudity of Lucifer go I will be one of 20 loiterers who failed to see the non-event. It's news to me, but elevator music to blasé concentric spheres, i.e., when in a chasm or a vacuum I hear heart or hoofbeats, they're my own. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heikki. The next one up is Paul Farwell. Paul grew up on the West Coast in Southern California and now lives on the other in the Boston area. He did his PhD in philosophy at SUNY Stony Brook and has always been amazed at the things people believe. His work has appeared in the Antioch Review, Salt Hill Journal, and Chicago Quarterly Review, which is forthcoming. Welcome, thank you.
Thanks, Dora. Thanks for having me. Just wanted to say a word on the background of this story. Meet me at the Alacaster. As I get, yeah.
Yeah, you want to turn off the volume, I think, somewhere because you're echoing.
Is it still echoing?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can control that. Dora, is it echoing for you?
It's echoing for me as well.
Do you want me to draw it and then come back?
I think what you need to do is mute the volume on your monitor. I think that's what's coming out.
Oh, okay, gotcha. How about that? Is that better?
Talk a little bit more.
Yeah, is that better now?
Not quite.
Not quite, yeah.
Odd. I wasn't echoing before. I wonder if I drop back. How about that? Do you want to go to the next one? I'll follow.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, I'll drop.
No problem. So then next up instead is Kerry James Evan. Kerry James Evans is the author of Bangalore. He teaches in the creative writing program at Georgia College and State University and also serves as the poetry editor for Arts and Letters. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks, Isadora, and thank you, Polly. Thank you all for being here. And I'll just read one poem. I'll read Casserole Island. And this is my first time in Willow Springs, so I'm really grateful. So Casserole Island. Like every other barely millennial, self-proclaimed exile, I cashed in both remaining vacation days, then drove through the night for the annual non-denominational holiday visit, which quickly became a very denominational, in this case, Protestant holiday visit, where, upon stepping into the house, I was volunteered to bless the island of casseroles, green beans glazed in aluminum pans of cream of mushroom soup, and children squirmed like front row participants at their own exorcism. Speaking of the devil, Aunt Bee brought her prize-winning sweet potato pie, She thinks Cool Whip is for Hicks. Speaking of Hicks, my ex-wife from Polk County contributed pineapple citrus ambrosia, which I blessed with 2 hands, making the sign of the cross, as if to say, don't eat this. It's not food. The island covered with dump cake and green dessert, cobblers and wiggly salads. I blessed them all with a heathen's hand. Then, like the apologetic, recovering alcoholic I am, I proceeded with the primal task of appeasing the in-laws, glopping spoonfuls onto doubled up styrofoam plates. At one point, my ex-wife looked over her glasses and mouthed, "You don't have to eat that." But I did. I was hungry, having helped her father chop and carry what seemed like enough wood to last an apocalyptic winter. I finished my plate, then went back like ancestors of yore, peasants and nobles, captains and chambermaids. I did the work of a weak-chinned earl placating a king and his court. I ate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kerry. Next up, we have Henrietta Goodman. Henrietta is the author of 3 books of poetry. Most recently, her sonnet sequence titled All That Held Us won the 2018 John Ciardi Award and was published by BKMK Press. Her first book, Take What You Want, won the Beatrice Hawley Award from Alice James Books and was published in 2007. She has published poems and essays in the New England Review, New Ohio Review, Terrain, the American Journal of Poetry, and other journals. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you so much to everybody at Willow Springs and to everybody who's listening. I have a light problem here on my couch. There we go. I'm just going to read my poem from this issue. It's called The Repetitive Bird. Remember the day we walked along the river and found a folded sheet of paper sealed in a plastic bag, a page from the personal reality section of the Urantia book, which we had to Google. Technical analysis does not reveal what a person or a thing can do. In the left margin, a bullseye, the spirit nucleus. Who doesn't need a thought adjuster, a mystery monitor? In the bar, the band plays Love the One You're With, an awful song, but will I ever stop looking around to see how many lives I might have? They play it as a ballad, molto ritondardo, for the bachelorettes and the ranchers and one cute hippie kid, barely 21, dancing with a woman my age in an ugly sweater who must be his mother. Maybe I'll leave everyone eventually. Of course I will. Remember the repetitive bird, like the beginning of Beethoven's Fifth with one fewer note. Dum-ta-dum, dum-ta-dum. Molto ritondardo, Dondo over and over at civil dawn, the blue hour, while we lay in something close to Shavasana, the cabin quiet, mice asleep. The only sixth sense is proprioception. I know well now where my body is, how it's positioned and balanced, how hard or gently to grasp. Unless you're drunk, it's easy. Even plants can do it. That bird might be a golden-crowned sparrow in its non-breeding range. Those opening notes, most likely for Beethoven, the sound of the yellow hammer, not fate hammering the door. You held me so lightly I couldn't feel your hands at all. To get fully into the body is to get out of the body, to enter yoga nidra, dream yoga, maybe even the trance bardo. That day at the river, we found a little charm, 3 square beads that spelled the name Sam, short for Samantha probably, in blue and pink letters, but I read it then and now, upside down, as Mas, the more I've always wanted. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Henrietta. Next up, we have Marc Vincenz. Marc is a poet, fiction writer, translator, editor, musician, and artist. He has published over 30 books of poetry, fiction, and translation. His work has been published in many journals, including The Nation, Plowshares, Raritan, World Literature Today, Evergreen Review, and the Los Angeles Review of Books. He is publisher and editor of Mad Hat Press and the publisher of New American Writing. His newest books are 3 Might Be a Moon or a Dog, 39 Wonders and Other Management Issues, and The Pearl Diver of Iranmani. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you so much, Isadora. And I'm just going to read the poem from this issue. And I thank you very much for letting me join the family. And I'll read a second poem after that, both fairly short. Fire Tattoo. From the underside of the world, she emerged as an eel out of the carcass of a waterlogged horse. All her invisible powers, just as they appeared in that comic book. One string on her shoulder, bullets hailing, and just as desperately as she wanted to be superfluous. How? Listen, we've loved the bureaucrat and no doubt the politician too. From the wafer in your chocolate ice cream to the glacial air breathing across our faces, we've been robbed. Every newspaper mutters it. Moses meant what he said. Imagine this. You're not who you think you are at all. And the second poem I'm going to read is called The Rhinoceros Affair. And it hails from the new book I'm working on called No More Animal Poems. The Rhinoceros Affair. Even after the party, after being plied in all manner of quaint aphorisms, I still hungered for his touch. I couldn't resist spreading the word. He was the best to ever grace my ramshackle cabins. And as I told the others, he made my blood simmer, broil and roil. Of course, the theory goes, all the magic came from that single majestic horn, sharpened to an immaculate point. There were those who jealously wanted to lop it off. Others figured it might be useful later and considered renting a warehouse down on the docks, so whichever parts would be harvested and sold might be hastily transported elsewhere in the known world. Late in the early hours after the last nightcap, his legend still circulates the empty halls. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marc. So before our next reader, we're going to go back to Paul Farwell. And just as a reminder, in case you forgot earlier, Paul grew up on the West Coast in Southern California and now lives on the other in the Boston area. He did his PhD in philosophy at SUNY Stony Brook and has always been amazed at the things people believe. His work has appeared in the Antioch Review, the Salt Hill Journal, and Chicago Quarterly Review.
Oh, thanks, Dora. Is this better?
So much better. Perfect.
Oh, good. I don't know what that was, but at any rate, okay, so I was just going to say a quick word on the context of the story. So I was saying the inspiration is as I get older, the world around me seems to get younger. For instance, the comic books that I bought as a kid, the Marvel comic books were 10 cents, maybe a quarter, have now become a blockbuster movie franchise. And this isn't a bad thing. Youth, of course, is a good thing, but sometimes it's not always so good. So in this story, Meet Me at the Alacaster, a large real estate developer buys an old shopping center in a town near Plymouth with the idea of developing it into a theme park based on a character, mythological character called the Alacaster, which is based loosely on the Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. In the same shopping center is a struggling family-owned pharmacy who have to decide whether they really want to continue in business, whether they want to sell their store to this real estate developer or whether they want to battle the Alacaster. And so that brings me to the last couple of pages of the last section of the story, Meet Me at the Alacaster. I look at my son Luke and wonder what it means for our children to inherit the earth. We're together this afternoon because the Green Family Pharmacy has closed on a Saturday for the first time since it opened. Luke wears his shorts and sneakers, ready to run around. For his school project, he insists on visiting our Alacaster for the second time in a week. I've tried to convince him we'll learn more by visiting the historic monuments in downtown Plymouth. But when I open the back door of my car, he rushes to the oversized planter in our parking lot. Tell me again what question we're supposed to answer, I ask Luke. He puts both hands in the alabaster's basin and starts to climb. Last week we did what in class? This week we do why. Not much to work with. Okay, I say, then why do you suppose the Pilgrims made the trip across the ocean? The food had to be terrible. Cranials, he answers. He wants to talk about alabasters, not pilgrims. He asks me to lift him up, which I do, by the waist of his sweatpants. I settle him onto my shoulders and feel the sharp bones of his hips against the palms of my hands. Food remains a struggle between us. If I get him to eat a grape, I'll call it dinner. I wonder what nourishes him. I fear the day when his enchantment with the world disappears. Soon he'll be a teenager. Tell me about cranials, I ask. They shoot fire from the holes in their heads, he says, burns everything up. Everything, I ask? Everything they hate. Like the Pilgrims, I say, reaching for any connection I can. Lucas seems interested. Oh? Pilgrims thought they saw things no one else saw and knew things no one else did. Luke picks up a handful of the black plastic beads from the alabaster's bed. Some of it spills onto me. Why, he asks. Why what? Why did they think that? I feel a parent's burden of explanation. Because people believe in all sorts of things. Like what, he asks. Like nice guys finish last and Christmas trees have something to do with Christmas. I feel Luke freeze in place and realize my mistake. I mean, trees do have something to do with Christmas. Not originally, but now they do. It's like, well, if enough people believe in something is real, it becomes real. Paul is the cute beetle. Bob Dylan is a great poem. Gold never loses its value. I could go on. Like I said, I'm winging it. Dad, Lucas asks. What? I want to run around. I ease him off my shoulders and gently onto the pavement. He's free to dash around the perimeter of the alabaster's basin with his arms stretched out, flapping them. A boy turned into a bird. I've missed my chance to explain the fantasy that brought our forefathers here, the visible saints who live in a gleaming city on the hill and think they're the chosen ones. But Lucas doesn't need to hear that. He's glad to be outside and happy in the moment. I've forgotten what that's like. Done running, he asks me to lift him again. I lower him onto the lip of the alabaster's wall. His skinny legs dangle over the side. Luke, you know that Pop is closing the store, right? In this light, his eyes are even paler than his grandfather's. Where is he going? Luke asks. Nowhere, really. Where are you going? I'm not going anywhere either, I assure him. I'll get a new job, or I'll take a long vacation. There's a festival in the desert called Burning Man. You know your father used to be an artist, right? He nods his head, though I doubt he really understands. He's probably overheard his mother saying, Lucas's dad was unemployed when we married, as if unemployed and artist were synonymous. And maybe he's intrigued to learn that adults visit a place called Burning Man. I want to make this creature, I say, a very tall one with bright orange tangled hair. When the wind blows, it whistles at you. At night, it catches fire. Luke's eyes widen. Real fire? Yes, I say, as real as fire gets. And thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you. That's lovely. Next up, we have Jeffrey J. Higa. Jeffrey is a fiction writer, essayist, playwright, and pigeon poet from Hawaii. His collection, Calabash Stories, was the winner of the Robert C. Jones Prize and was shortlisted for the 2022 William Saroyan International Prize for Writing. He has published in Ziziva, Tahoma Literary Review, Sonora Review, Salt Hill, Bamboo Ridge, the Hawaii Review of Books, and Poets and Writers. He is currently publishing his COVID project, The Pigeon Inferno, a Hawaii Creole version of Dante's Inferno. He lives in Honolulu with his partner, the biologist Marguerite Butler, and their good dog, Tim Tam.
There we go. Okay, wanted to thank Willow Springs for publishing this story. I'm amazed at how well it fits in with everybody else's work, and honored by that. I think I'm gonna just jump in the middle here, and it starts, the first time it happened, we were sure it must have been a mistake. It was easy to see why. The boy was not yet a teenager, although the local authorities had declared he was dead. And 2 days later, even the good doctor had come to the village, bearing an official certificate with a pen signature and a continental blue-black ink that was said to contain a kind of iron integrity that would make it permanent for all time. The children pretended to play across from the carpenter's shop while he silently pieced together the small cabinet that looked less like a casket than a coracle rabbited with a tightness that made us believe it could have been seaworthy. It displayed the parsimonious dovetailing, which eliminated the need for nails, but of a kind of type that you won't find today, even among the most skilled artisans, except in the dreams of certain old men with callous pads on the tips of their fingers and along the fringes of their sunken palms, like the underside of a bear paw. The next day, we all followed the family through the heat of the dusty flats to the cemetery and stayed to watch our friend be lowered into the dry hole, and then withdrew back to our homes that evening to suffer the ministrations of our grandmothers who had resurrected rituals they had learned from their grandmothers when they were children to ward off the evil eye. None of the parents believed them when the children complained late that night of being unable to sleep because of the incessant moaning that apparently only they could hear, like the lamentation of an ancient tree slowly keeling over in repose. Lazar. Blinded by frustration and bound together by the injustice of the insensate elders, the children spurned the warmth of their beds and stumbled out into the darkness, like dazed homunculi to the source of that sound, pulled like a beacon to the graveside where they had stood earlier that day. The creaking was unbearable here, so they dug with their hands in the fine-grained dirt to expose the coffin of their friend, which bulged and groaned like the leathery egg of some mythical creature about to burst forth. Suddenly, branches torn from nearby trees by the more quick thinking among them were passed around, and they started to beat that coffin in a wild cadence, less to silence the fulsome creaking than as another improvisation to accompany this festive event. At some point, their drumming must have cracked the lid, for it broke into several pieces and fell into the coffin. For a moment, there was a complete silence, a stillness like the eye of a hurricane, save for the labored exhalations like a thirsty animal emanating from the darkness within the coffin. In a slant of moonlight that cleared some cloud cover just at that moment, like a heavenly beam from the eye of God himself, they saw a pair of hands grip the gunwales of the casket, and the boy who had been declared officially dead, certified, and borne to his grave, pushed himself up until he stood looking up at them unblinkingly, his face awash in light. Drownings are always tricky things, is all the authorities would say. Children, the doctor was reported to have said with a shrug, such miraculous healers. The celebration. We all accepted it for what it was, a cosmic mistake, a wrinkle in the timeline of fate, and among the more religious among us, a divine correction and rebuke of the greedy reach of the evil one. The boy's mother celebrated by pinning the death certificate to the wall of their hut, where it could be mocked and insulted by all who entered, for their homecoming feast to honor the boy who had escaped from that most unjustified of deaths, drowning, and somehow slipped fate to return to them. The boy, however, seemed mostly unmoved by the festivities as he sat in his place of honor and turned a placid face toward all of us, silently scanning us like a scientist, observing the sacred rituals of a heretofore unknown tribe. But what did we expect? Who knew what he must have experienced in the anteroom of the hereafter? Would any of us have acted any different if we had been wrested from the grip of death? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Next up, we have David Keplinger. David is the author of 8 collections of poetry, recently Ice, The World to Come, and Another City. He is the recipient of the 2019 UNT Rilke Prize, the 2020 Emily Dickinson Award for the Poetry Society of America, the 2021 Minds on Fire Prize, as well as being shortlisted for the 2020 National Translation Award for his work with Danish poet Carsten René Nielsen. Other works in translation include Jans Wagner, The Art of Topiary. Welcome.
Thank you. The poems that I'm going to read are in conversation with Bruce Bond, who is going to be following me directly after this reading. So Bruce and I wrote letters in 3 different forms, back and forth to each other, and collecting a manuscript. This is called Note Left in the Hubble Telescope, 1990. And there's an epigraph. There is no coincidence of seeing and being seen, but each borrows from the other, encroaches upon the other, crosses itself with the other, is in chiasmus with the other. And that's Merleau-Ponty. Note Left in the Hubble Telescope, 1990. Yes, there is an I in everything. Bruce, therefore, I left this here at mile marker 1, as the lens snapped pictures of its first star cluster. There was a photomat next door to the arcade where I played Space Invaders. I remember how I'd seal the packet and launch my cylindrical film into the night box. In time, the prints came back. By then, I had forgotten what any of it meant. Here, a random open road. There, a drunken me passed out, spinning in a dream I was inventing and erasing as I went along. And then the second poem is Note Left on the Back of an Antique Mirror. Like the oldest metals that are so distant from their origins, it is impossible to know how they arrived here. This mirror back that never changes weighs like bedrock below the shifting grasses of my face. Yes, dear Bruce, you understand me then. I've always chosen weird estrangement, missed a little bit ahead of me, an unfulfilled wish. It's enough to know there is a back half of experience that holds it all and suffers nothing. The hands that made it are less than sand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Next up, we have Bruce Bond. Bruce is the author of 32 books, most recently Plurality and the Poetics of Self, Words Written Against the Walls of the City, Scar, Behemoth, The Calling, Patmos, Liberation of Dissonance, and Invention of the Wilderness. Forthcoming books include Choreomania, The Mirror, The Patch, The Telescope, Therapon, and Vault. His work has appeared in numerous journals and anthologies, including 7 editions of Best American Poetry. Presently, he is Regents Emeritus Professor of English at the University of North Texas. Welcome.
Thanks so much. And thanks to Polly, who, by the way, is a phenomenal poet. There are a bunch of phenomenal poets up there in the Northwest and at that university in particular. And thanks to Marc. Marc Vincenz is the publisher of this book project that is forthcoming. So David mentioned a little bit about it. The title is The Mirror, the Patch, the Telescope. It starts with a section of postcards and then goes to voicemails and then goes to notes. And so there's a sense of the proximities changing as we go forward. I remember seeing a lecture by a philosopher who was talking about phenomenology of the senses and how when you understand someone, you see what they're saying. And then when you more empathetically engage with them, you hear them, and then ultimately you feel them. So there is a sense of that being mirrored in the book as we move from postcards to voicemails to notes. So these poems we're reading are the notes. I'm going to start with note left at the far end of the street. Oh, I've frozen. This happens. I'm going to start, and this might happen again, so I'll just keep reading. Note left at the far end of the street. Oh, I should say one more thing. The poem that precedes this is an incredibly imaginative one by David, which is about the nightgown of St. Francis. So in that poem, the gown comes off, the hood, and it's as if a sleepwalker is awakening in the middle of a street. So this is my response, note left at the far end of the street. That moment of estrangement, when the hood comes off, when you, in perfect stillness, hear the flutter of moths about a streetlight overhead. It tells you, David, some part of you is not quite finished. It never is. Even the hiss of sprinklers behind you in the dark, you will hear it once again, never knowing how near they were, why you pause, whose street this is, as you, the orphan of your path, step into the mist ahead. And the second one I'll read is actually the very last poem in the book. And this will make more sense if I tell you a little about David's poem before it. First of all, it has an epigraph from Rilke. Wer jetzt allein ist, wird es lange bleiben. So that translates as whoever is alone now will long remain so. Note left in an echo of the note before. I should clarify one more thing. The first word I'm going to say is the German allein, meaning alone. And then I will say the words a line, the English words. Allein, I read aloud now. And no sooner a line lies down in the circle of the ear. It threads the aperture, crossing over as one setting out into the wilderness, crosses the path of a nocturnal creature whose dark print cuneiforms the mire. As you know, David, the two will never meet, as a note of music never meets the one to come. And yet you hear in lines, each inside the other, as one hears in the fade of some last chord, a little of them all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Next up, we have Jenny Irish. Jenny is from Maine and lives in Arizona. She is the author of the hybrid collections Common Ancestor and Toothbox. The short story, and in addition to the short story collection, I Am Faithful, and the forthcoming chapbook, Lupine. She facilitates free community workshops every summer. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Dora. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all. This is called Lupin and Jardin des Plantes. Above the field of lupin is a shimmer of mayflies waiting to die. Their life is a warm green day, then done. Lupine is named for the wolf because concealed inside the flower is a fang, and because where lupine bloom, the land is depleted, the soil drained of what makes other green things grow. Lion, this is the dominance of wolves, that sharp two things in nature provoke such vivid evocation, they are given our name. Lion, I had heard stories of your serrated tongue and how it could separate the skin from the flesh underneath. A shepherdess peeled as easily as the yawning macaques do their fruit. Even in the menagerie, there is a forest of trees, though tamed. And in the branches, there are watchful eyes, and whispers are passed from beak and maw and muzzle to ear and ear and ear. With you, lion, came a sound like rain's first breaking. 1,000 clean bodies, fallen and burst, but there was no rain, no wetness darkening dry earth. It was only the word lion, unfurling like a fern from every long or pointed tongue. The word lion, living in the air. The word lion, like a banner lifted in the wind. Lion, take their human skins, lay lazy and lapping, the body becoming under your touch a red but recognizable form. Lion, left long enough to your licking, you leave behind a polished skull, a souvenir of danger. Lion, take their human skins. I will take their throats and scatter their bones. I will leave no trace of me, but the land depleted. Human, build your house from straw, build your house from sticks, build your house high on stilts, build your house from bricks. Lupine means of the wolf, because concealed inside the flower is a fang. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And our last reader for tonight is Madison Jozefiak. Madison is a fiction writer and copywriter from Boston. She graduated from Colgate University with a degree in English and creative writing. Her short fiction also appears in Inscape Literary Journal, the Baltimore Review, and Thin Air magazine. Welcome, Madison.
Thank you, Dora. And thank you everyone for being here. All those readings were lovely. This story is named for exactly what it is. So it's all the title is really all the context you need. This is a tour of the mural at the Mirari Public Library. On the left-hand side of the western wall, painted waves roll towards us in swells of green and grayish blue. A lattice lace of foam breaks across the surface, while underneath, the ocean's inhabitants coexist in harmony. It is the beginning of time, a mythological construct which defies logical reason, and yet, despite a lack of evidence, might very well have occurred. As you can see, the octopus is relishing a moment of solitude in a kelp forest. The pale green sickle of the moray eel, curling around a coral pillar, is joined just underneath by the smoothhound shark, whose curved gray body is reminiscent of a classic car. The tiger-striped scoop of the Nautilus's shell drifts in open water above the rest. The big-headed grouper lumbers at the sandy bottom, and the red bristles of the rockfish's fin emerge from behind a convoluted structure of the multicolored reef. All things underwater belong unconditionally to the vast, volatile ocean. They thrive off of its vitality as the ocean thrives from theirs. Now let's turn to the right-hand side of the western wall, which transitions from the left with a change in the sky, a sunset gradient, to indicate a shift in perspective. A lone woman is perched on the sea cliffs, bent over and draped in a dark blue fabric that shimmers with bronze, like the rust of shipwrecks accenting her clothes. This is the so-called sea witch who lives in caves along the rocky shoreline. There's a degree of self-righteousness in the way she stands alone, although the cliffs look bleak in comparison to the ocean's abundance and diversity of life. Taken as a whole, the Western Wall is a stunningly detailed panoramic view from ocean to coast. It goes without saying that the artist has done a spectacular job. During my tours, I'm often concerned with the level of appreciation I might expect from all of you, you with your sun-baked faces and bellies full of clams. You are not ocean people. You are beach people. You have spent the better part of the day flat on your backs, roasting, while the hyperactive children currently running figure eights around your legs were left to drink blue slushy and build their sloppy sandcastles unattended. Still, I hold out faith. I believe in your potential. If you are familiar with the town and its oral histories, you would know that this wall of the Mirari Public Library is actually a one-sided love story. Note how the painted waves fall, the down curves like greedy and possessive claws. The ocean is emotional and unpredictable. It is constantly shifting, intricate and deep, glowing aquamarine in the sun. The shore, on the other hand, is rigid and unspontaneous, with unlovable rock structures. You might think that, for the shore, the ocean would be a catch, but the land here has always been mysteriously resistant to erosion. The waves pull endlessly at the rocks and beaches, tormented by unrequited feelings, disrupting the natural patterns of tidal movement. I see that a few of you are chuckling behind your hands. It's regrettable that I witness such behavior frequently, and yet I am encouraged by the fact that you're trying to conceal your amusement. Apparently you understand I take my tours very seriously. It is no laughing matter that the sea has fallen in love with the land and that the land does not return the sea's affections. It has wide-ranging implications for the ecosystem. We will explore this further as we turn the corner, but first I'd like to pause for questions. Are there any questions regarding this first wall of the mural? Yes, you. How long have I been a tour guide? This question has nothing to do with the mural, but I will tell you, 7 years. Any more questions? Do I do this for a living? Of course not. I am merely a dedicated volunteer, striving to bring one of the most cherished stories of our community to life for those passing through. Often it seems that I am met at every turn of these library walls with nothing more than the glassy-eyed stares of tourists who, after barely 5 minutes of introduction, are curious about little else aside from where their next meal is coming from. I'm driven on nonetheless by an undying conviction that someone, one day, will step away from my tour and see this place and its people in a different light, just as I did when I first began to investigate historical evidence that speaks to the validity of the legend. Another question? Do I have any restaurant recommendations? Alessandro's on Main Street is the best. Tell the server that Christopher was your tour guide today and they'll send out a free appetizer. Moving on. No more questions, people. Contain yourselves. There will be time later.
Thank you so much, Madison. And I would just like to take a moment to thank all the readers. And now I believe we're going to start with the Q&A.
Yes, so I'm going to put us on, there we go. So audience, and I see there's people on YouTube listening as well. Hang on, there's my face. Go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. Unfortunately, we did have some bombers at the beginning and we kicked those losers off. So hopefully you didn't notice. But here's the issue, and if you have questions for the authors, go ahead and post those now in the Q&A, and we'll be looking between you and the YouTube site as well. So I'll give you a minute to type those in.
I've also got a list of seeded questions from our poetry editor who wasn't able to make it today. So I can use one or two of those to at least break the ice here. This is just kind of hopefully a softball for you, but this one is for David and Bruce. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the story behind your collaboration? Kind of what the process is like and what you find engaging about it?
Hit it, David.
Bruce covered a lot of that. I don't remember how we came upon the idea, but we just decided that we were going to write some poems together. We met in 2019 and struck up a close friendship, and we wanted to explore that in letters and poems as letters. And so I think what we did first was decide that we were going to write an opening and a closing poem that was the two of us together. Each of us wrote a stanza. And then we decided to write 3 sequences of poems that were exactly the same length. I think that are they 11 lines long? I haven't looked in a while, but they as Bruce said, were going to be postcards and notes and voicemails. And we just had a great time. I think we wrote the whole thing in a matter of about 4 or 5 months, but we were pretty steady.
It was kind of a whirlwind. I think the overall structure, it didn't come immediately. David initially proposed the postcard idea, which I thought was interesting because then we could triangulate our conversation with some kind of image, that would be in back of the poem. So that was interesting immediately. People don't seem to write postcards anymore, so it already seemed like something from the past, which also was interesting. We both also loved Rilke, and there was an epigraph that I think, David, you found, wasn't it? Or I don't remember exactly how this happened, but it was from Requiem for a Friend. If I could, this won't take too much time, but it's interesting that this epigraph also invokes the senses, and that was kind of a happy accident. So the epigraph is, tell me, must I travel? Did you leave something behind, some place which cannot bear your absence? Must I set out for a country you never saw? Although it was as vividly near to you as your own senses are. So one thing I didn't mention about that structure of the sort of seeing, hearing, feeling, maybe it's already implied, but there's a kind of a contraction of distance that's going on in that. And I think that's a kind of beautiful thing. So it becomes a kind of meditation on not only, our inextricable natures, but our inviolable aloneness, the sense that we're all so very, very connected and yet essentially alone. Yeah, which makes dialogue possible.
And that last poem too, which is all about the aloneness and
yeah.
We have a bunch more questions in the Q&A. Jennifer asks, Madison, I'm curious how you first came up with the persona of the tour guide. He feels so well developed, especially when you read him aloud.
Thanks for that question. It's a good one because there didn't used to be a tour guide. When I first wrote the story, when I initially wrote it, it was just a myth of how the town was developed from sea creatures, and I didn't like it that much. So I thought it would be a good idea. I eventually decided to bring it into the present and have someone telling it as the tour guide, as the direct descendant. And he just kind of, his whole personality developed from one fish in particular. So it kind of happened naturally, but I sort of like arrived at a voice that I thought was humorous and engaging and kept working with it and have fun. I like that character.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a fabulous story and so full of character. We have a question from Jordan here for Emma. She says, I would love to hear more about the impetus for Emma's poem. That book, what a beautiful find.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jordan. Yeah, I honestly can't remember exactly how I found that little book. It's at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, I know, but I've never seen it in person. But I just a few years ago was doing this whole project where I was researching portrait miniatures. So I have many, many poems that came out of that project. That is one, but there are also poems that look at eye miniatures and other just kind of strange forms. But I was very interested in that kind of like dressable miniature, especially as being one that there aren't a lot of examples left of. They're very fragile, very weird. So there are like a couple others I found, but that one just really grabbed me, especially the kind of the way that she could be dressed as an animal or as like a king, you know, things she wouldn't have normally been able to be. Yeah.
We have a question from YouTube.
I was I was going to ask that one with a spin on it.
Right.
This one's for Jeffrey. This is partially me and partially one of our YouTube folks, Butler here. And it's just kind of a question about the relationship of life and death and land in your story. And I in particular was really struck by the idea of uncertainty with all of those elements. And I was wondering if you had any particular thoughts on how that relates to the history of Hawaii and the concept of like aloha aina, or just the care of the land in general.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I guess coming from Hawaii, you just know it's a special place with special things that don't happen on other islands, but it's also very small. You can get anywhere on Oahu in an hour, and the Big Island maybe an hour and a half. So you see the land constantly being turned into something else or changed, or there's a metamorphosis as time goes on. The same areas become different things. And so that idea about this constant rebirth, this constant bringing up of new stories and old stories which speak to the things that are here now, I guess is an idea that I really enjoy playing with in my fiction. Did that answer the question? I'm not sure. And of course, we know how rare land is, how hard it is to get here in the islands. So it's kind of always in the back of your mind that you have to, respect it, take care of it. And, in some ways it can give you life, but it can also kill you. So, yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you. So we have another question from our web editor, Blair, and this is directed at anybody who wants to take a stab at it. I'd love to know, how often do you find yourself writing a narrator or character who is a part of you versus finding your way into another's mind? And if you do break into another's mind, how have you come to do that?
I guess for me, a lot of the characters, the narrator comes out of the language itself. So I find that sometimes some stories require kind of an elevated kind of language that isn't really me. And so the narrator comes out of that. And some other characters sound like how I would have sounded or I was sounded. They feel closer to me that way.
Yeah, my take on that is I don't think I could write about a character unless I can internalize it. Even if it's something I haven't gone through myself or experienced. It's funny that most of my stories end up in first person, but even if I were to write in third person, I think I'd have to kind of empathetically go through whatever the character's going through.
All right. Any last questions? Or if anybody wants to take another stab at that.
I have a question from Iran, our poetry editor, for Henrietta here, which has to do with the musicality of your poem. So I love the musical knowledge and depth in your piece. I'm curious about what role the music, rhythm, and/or melodies play in other poems, and if you often find yourself drawn to this engagement with the sound, or if this is a particularly inspired piece in terms of that aspect.
I love that question because I love music in general, and if I had musical talent, I wouldn't be doing this. I would be somewhere singing, and nobody wants to hear that. But with that poem in particular, I was it was that one bird, and I think it was not a golden crowned sparrow. I think it was probably just a weird chickadee. But at least that's the best I can determine. But it was beautiful, and it was this like minor key, just gorgeous every morning. I was at the Boyden residency in Southwestern Oregon, and listening to it every morning, only in the morning. So that, for that poem, and it sounded so much like that so familiar Beethoven thing that I started researching it and just kind of went crazy. So I think that music is in a lot of my poems, both in attention to rhythm and sound, but also just literal references to music are all over the place, because that was my first love and is still my first love. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Great. So there's a follow-up question or clarification from Butler on YouTube. For Jeffrey, he says, actually, my question was more about whether Jeffrey drew inspiration from cultural beliefs, stories, legends around death in Hawaii.
Yeah. Oops. My mom. Okay. Yeah. I guess, there's, especially in the Japanese community, the Okinawan community, there's a, Obon, where the dead come back once a year at this time of year to come visit you, and there's a celebration to welcome them. And I also worked at a historic homes museum where there was a lot of supernatural, paranormal happenings. So while I started the job as not a believer, my 9 years there convinced me otherwise. So yeah. And it was from all over, the Filipinos, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Korean, they all had different explanations for the things that were going on. And it was very educational that way.
That's fascinating. All right. Well, it looks like we are done with our questions. If anybody has anything else, say it now, type it now. Otherwise, thank you everybody for coming. This is the issue. It is available on our website. And really the reading was fantastic. This was really great to hear everybody. And it was really neat to hear how the pieces seem to echo each other in many ways. So yeah, have a great night. And if anybody else has anybody else to say, just go ahead and say it. Otherwise, see ya.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.